Welcome to part 4, and yeah, this is pretty much where the fun begins.
This is where the
We
fun
can now add
begins.
textures and details to our model until really make it come alive. But before we can add this, we've got to do some UV unwrapping. Now, UV unwrapping, we just go to the UV editing tab. This part of the process is generally what Blender users hate the most. It's tedious and it's boring. And you know, it often doesn't do what you want, but I'll show you best to my ability of how to get through it. So to explain what UV wrapping is, let me go back to the layout and let's add a cube just for demonstration purposes. If you remember in primary school or kindergarten, when you had to make a cube out of paper, and you would cut it up into little squares, and it would come out to be almost like a cross. And then you would have to fold it in and glue it all together. And that's pretty much what UV editing is. So if we go to the UV Edit tab, while we have the cube selected, you can see it's unfolded it like that. Each lines are marked and you can clearly see them. If it's not showing up here, just select all by hitting A or just clicking on it and going into edit mode. For square or cube, it's really simple. Anyone could UV unwrap a square, but you know, how do you UV unwrap a tree? How would you unfold a car? And there you can see where it begins to get a little bit tedious. Luckily, Blender has some built-in tools to make the workflow a little bit easier. And unless your texture has patterns, you don't actually always have to match it up perfectly. For example, if your texture is one simple color, it wouldn't matter where the cuts are or where the folds intersected. So let's delete this cube. And now let's select our base. Go into edit mode by hitting tab and make sure everything is selected. As you can see, Blender has automatically unwrapped it, but the unwrap's not perfect, but honestly, it's not too bad. If nothing's showing up here, you're going to want to hit U, and now it'll give you all the unwrapping options. We're going to start just by using the simpler options, which is the Smart UV Project. There are different modes, but I think that would be a better tutorial to just explain purely unwrapping. So let's hit Smart UV Project. Let's leave everything as default, and then it's okay. Now it perfectly cuts it up and places it all around. Since it's a square, most of the stuff it does automatically is going to be fine. But if you're working with more of a curved shape, you would want to go up to the top here, and where these little circles are, go down and click Display Stretch. Now dark blues are what you want. Greens and yellows mean that there's something wrong. It means that the map or the UV unwrap has stretched it, and any textures you display on that are going to be warped. But like I said, with geometric shapes, you're normally going to be in the clear. Even some light blue is fine. Really, you only have to be worried when it's yellow, green, or especially red. Now that we've UV unwrapped it, we can add a text to it. We're not going to have to UV unwrap the glass, although we can. So once again, it's the same process. Select all, hit U, Smart UV Project, and click OK. As you can see, there's now a bit of stretching, but it's still blue. And because the glass doesn't have any patterns or textures on it, it doesn't matter too much. The main focus should be the base because that's going to be wood and there's going to be very specific details that you'd notice overlapping. I know that might have been quite complicated, but you're going to get better the more you do it, and it's really just practice and time. So once we've unwrapped, we can now go to shading. Once you click on shading, you can have two viewports, one for managing shader nodes and one to see where your model is. If you're super far away, just hit the full stop and it's going to bring you right up to your model. We're now just default in the EV renderer, but you can go back to your viewport, but you're going to want to stick in the EV renderer. And if you have quite a powerful computer, you could even just leave it live display on cycles. But we'll leave it on the EV computer or the EV renderer. And let's start by adding a new texture. So just click New Texture and let's give it a name. And we're just going to call it wood. I'm going to try and make this a bit bigger so it's easier for you to see. Now there are a bunch of settings here, but for the first time, or the majority of the time, the only ones you're going to use are metallic, roughness, and probably transmission, and base color. Anything else you really don't want to be touching unless you know what you're doing. And some of these, even though you can change for lots of different increments, you're actually normally only going to want to have it off or on, because an object really can only be metallic or not metallic. You don't really get, 50% metallic objects. So anyway, now that we've got that, but how are you going to add wood to this? You could, you know, choose a base color, add it brown, maybe make it a bit darker, try all of that. But there's actually a way easier way to do this, and that is just go Shift A, and now you can search, and we're going to search for image texture. Once you have that selected, you can click open and find an image to use. Now before we do that, let's actually get an image. So I'm just going to go and get some free stock photos. Let me quickly find Chrome. There we go. So I've just used Unsplash, which is a free stock photo website. I'll leave a link in the description below. And now here I've just searched wood texture. So you can kind of just scroll down and see one that you like. I quite like this one, so I'm going to download it. Then once it's downloaded, it might take a little bit of time. And there we go. Once we have it downloaded, we can go back to Blender and we hit open. We find where it's been downloaded. There we go. Open image. And then we just drag the color one to the base color. You normally want to match these little things you see, green to green, purple to purples, but that's not always the case. It's just a general rule. So you grab color to base color. And as you can see, boom, just like that. Super easy. We now have a wooden looking base. If your scale's a bit messed up, you can hit Ctrl T, and this now will add you options to change the size and shape. But our scale is good, so we won't have to do that. If that didn't work for you, you're gonna have to go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and then you're gonna have to search Node Wrangler. Once you have that enabled, when you hit Ctrl T, it'll automatically add the scale and transformations. These are quite useful when you want to move the location or rotate the texture. But like I said, for the time being, ours seems like it's mapped perfectly. We might want to maybe make it a little bit rougher, because you know, wood's not really that smooth. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with how it looked out. Now, glass is even simpler. We could just go add a new texture and use this principal one. So let's actually first do that, and then I'll show you the easier way. So let's go down, and here, this is all we want, is transmission. This is pretty much whether something is see-through or not. So right now it's completely opaque, but to make a transmission, just scroll it all the way up to 1, and now it should be glass. In the Eevee renderer though, glass isn't rendered see-through, so to see the outcome of glass, we're going to have to change to the cycle renderer. Now, although we can see it is glass, it's still not perfectly see-through. Now that is because we have roughness. If the glass is rough, we won't be able to see through it. So if we take the roughness all the way down, and there we go, we have now perfect glass. Let's go back to the Eevee renderer. Like I said, there's actually an easier way to do this. So if we delete that, Shift A, and we just search the glass BSDF, and we can just use that. As you can see, the only thing we need is roughness, because much else you don't actually have to change the glass, and you just connect it, then boom, perfect glass. Now let's do the cubes, although we can't see the cubes, so let's go into wireframe mode, and actually, whoopsie, I meant X-ray mode, and let's select the cubes. Actually, let's rather do this. If you go back into modeling and you hit it on an object, if you hit H, it's going to hide that H or that object, and if you hit Alt H, it'll return. This is pretty useful when working things that are being covered by another object. So let's hit H, and now let's select our cubes. Since we're going to make these cubes the same color, we might as well actually join them. So if I hit Shift and click, and then hit Ctrl J, this will now join them and make them one object. Now let's add a texture. We can go back into the shading to add the texture, but a quicker way to do it, especially when you're adding quick textures or just demo textures, is go down into your properties tabs, find this one that says material property, and then click new material. Let's select the Eevee renderer so we can see what we're doing. And let's just make these maybe pink or blue. Let's have them light blue for the time being. There we go. Go back to the shader editor and hit Alt H. Oopsie. Delete our glass return. Once you've created all these different materials, you can just select through them which ones you want to use. So let's leave it on that. If we wanted to change the glass to wood, we don't have to recreate the wood texture. We can just select wood, and there we go. We now have a wood hourglass. So this is why naming them is really useful, because you will often be recycling textures or reusing materials. So let's rename that glass, and let's rename the blue cube, let's say blue cube. Let's set it back to glass. And now let's go back to modeling. And yep, that's pretty much all you want for textures. And so far it's looking good. For the next video, I think we'll look at working out lighting, and if there's enough time, we'll also use rendering and outputs. Thanks for watching, and once again, if you need any help, feel free to drop a comment down below. I'll try my best to fix it.